Money is energy. It moves, expands, contracts, and yet for so many of us, it also triggers something deeper, a tightening in the chest, a silent fear, a learned script we didn't even write. On today's podcast of Cosmic Confluence, we are not talking about budgets or investments. We are talking about the invisible inheritance, the generational patterns that live in our nervous systems and quietly shape our relationship with money. This is Yusuf, and my guest today, Jennifer Edwards, is a certified financial planner, a financial therapist, and a founder of Breakthrough Financial Wellness Consulting. Through her 7-layer financial wellness framework, she helps people move from financial distress to calm, confidence by exploring the deeper roots of money behavior, where psychology meets physiology and culture meets choice. Together, we'll explore how generational trauma doesn't just echo in our emotions, but also in our financial decisions, and how we can rewrite those inherited patterns to build something freer, calmer, and more aligned. Jennifer, it's a pleasure to have you on our show.
Thanks for having me. I enjoy being here.
Pleasure is ours. Jennifer, you often say money issues aren't just numbers on a screen. They are sensations in the body. And I find it very fascinating. Can you explain how trauma actually gets stored in our nervous system and shows up later in our financial behaviors?
Yes, that's it's something that I think we all really need to understand how our nervous systems are related to all of our decisions, but especially how they show up in our financial lives, because there's definitely a correlation there that's important to understand. So what happens is oftentimes when we have an experience, we will have an emotion, which is really the product of whatever is happening in our minds, and then it's basically being expressed through our bodies. So whatever the story is that we're telling ourselves, whatever that experience is, it comes out in our bodies. And the interesting thing about stress is that it's a very generalized response of the brain. There's a part of our brain in the back here called the amygdala, and it just lights up whenever it senses danger. This part of our brain comes from our ancestors who were really, they were a lot of times in their physical survival, right? They were fighting each other, they were fighting predators, they were fighting the elements. And so this stress system was developed to activate the body and to get it moving, to get it to do something. And it's this generalized response, and it doesn't care whether or not in the modern day it's a physical danger or an emotional danger, if it's something that's real, or just something that we've kind of just created in our minds as being dangerous. And so what happens in the case of trauma is we will find an experience that will activate this stress response. And then oftentimes we don't process that emotion completely. And like you have said, money is energy. So are our emotions. It's all energy. And what will happen is this emotion that we are experiencing, if it's not processed, if it doesn't reach its full expression, then it can refract inside of our body. And sometimes it'll even show up in physiological conditions. You might have pain certain places. You can have long-term trauma that might show up in chronic conditions. They've shown things like fibromyalgia, where it's just sort of like this neurological thing where it doesn't have a cause, but it might show up in things like that. So what happens with our stories is that we might have an experience. Let's say our family, I'll just use an extreme, although you don't have to have an extreme example to have psychological trauma related to money. But let's say your family experienced housing insecurity when you were younger, and nobody, even as a child, really comprehend everything that was going on, and your parents or your caregivers were probably in a high state of stress, And that energy is radiating out from them. And as a child, you're kind of a sponge. And so you're probably feeling a lot of that without a whole lot of the capacity to access it correctly. Again, that's the part of my brain that is developed almost immediately. And then, like, as we age and we get more brain developed, we move into the part that can actually think straight, which is our prefrontal cortex, which doesn't get fully developed until our mid-20s. So we can't think through this stuff effectively. We have to have our caregivers show us things. We have to kind of explain to us in ways that we can understand as children, which most caregivers aren't trained to. And if they're in a state of high stress, they're probably dealing with their own stuff. That's going to be very difficult for them to see what's going on for everybody else, which isn't their fault that that's going on. So the way that it can show is, let's say you have a housing insecurity thing, and you don't feel very secure about housing and about just in general. And so with trauma, the past is the present. So you might have an experience today that feels safe. That you need to say to your stress system, yeah, danger, danger, we need to try to take care of ourselves. But because that's in your nervous system, it shows up in the way that you're interacting with money today. So in the case of maybe housing insecurity, you might look at let's say you got to the point where you have bought a house and you're looking at your mortgage statement and you see that you owe a lot of money to the bank, and you would actually have a nervous system response. You might get heat building up inside of you. Your chest might tighten up. You might feel a little bit of like shaking, or like kind of like your body is needing to move. Again, that's that energy wanting to do something that's what the stress response wants to do, is activate you into doing something. And it might make you feel like, I really want to get this balance keyed off. And so you might work extra hours and you might throw all of your extra money into trying to pay off this house, try to alleviate that insecurity and that trauma response that's coming up when you're looking at your housing statement, which may or may not be the best financial decision. And oftentimes it's not. We have very low interest rates for on housing. You usually should leverage them with longer term investments. Take out a low interest rate mortgage and invest the difference instead of trying to throw it all at a low interest rate mortgage. For a lot of people, there's just that feeling of security that comes from having the paid off house, but that's probably because of some trauma, feeling like, maybe our family moved a lot, or maybe there was, it could show up and not even have anything to do with that. It could be that, a parent was maybe always talking about how money there wasn't enough, and, maybe yelling at the primary breadwinner to they needed to make more. And that's how your immature child brain interpreted things, was, related to the security of the home, because that's where the family lived. So we need to explore all of the beliefs that you're clearing from childhood into your adult life, and then see where these beliefs have come up, how they're affecting your life. And then if you have a neurological response to anything, it could be budgeting, it could be looking at your bank statements or your credit card statements. You could have a neurological response, again, like looking at your debt or your housing. You can have a neurological response that comes up when you're trying to even spend money. Some people, like, it just really feels insecure, like, they avoid spending money at all, and that decreases their quality of life and probably impacts their relationships negatively. So yeah, it can show up in a lot of ways.
Wow, that's so powerful and a new way to look at it, because maybe when someone freezes up before paying bills or feels guilty after spending, it's not just about bad money habits. It's might be their nervous system talking.
Yes. And my 7-layer framework helps us understand where the problem is initially that we need to tackle. So the 7 layers, I'm going to go from highest to lowest, just so you understand, because you started with neurological, which is the basic lowest level, the energy one, that's subatomic actually. So the first one is societal. And we could talk all day long about all of the ways that the systems in society are affecting our financial choices, our options, how the system is not set up for every group in society to succeed equally. And so that's the first thing that we come to a level of acceptance on that. We also see how can we change things if we can change things. Then the next layer is relational. So we're not violence. We're making financial decisions in relation to other people, in relation to our romantic partnerships, our family of origin, maybe you could have a living situation with roommates. It's affecting your financial decisions, that kind of stuff. The relationship between you and your boss or coworkers, those could all be parts of those things. So you have the typical case with this is you've got a saver and a spender in a relationship. Somebody who feels more inclined to spend money and somebody who feels more inclined to save money. And you might want to save money for your future or for some goal. And if you've got a partner who's more of a spender, who that living today and enjoying the moment is more of their priority, it's going to affect your ability to reach your particular needs. The next layer is educational. And this is the one that society often does. And do say this is where your financial choices were really made in the educational part, which is like literacy, right? You might just need more information, and that's part of it. Sometimes you do, but that's the only one. And oftentimes that's what they're saying is, okay, you need to learn something, and that's going to help you with your financial life. The fourth one down would be behavioral. And that's the only one that society says, yes, it could be that you need to form a new habit. You need to learn a new behavior. Maybe it's you need to sit down and do weekly budgeting, or you need to have a monthly money date with your partner, or you need to just get to the point where you're writing down all of your income and expenses, right? Those are new habits and new behaviors. And they're definitely on the list, but we oftentimes say that the solution for many things is in one of those two areas. And it could be many different things, which is why the 7 layers are important. So after behavioral would be physiological. So sometimes we're just making poor decisions because we have a physiological need. Like, for instance, you shouldn't go shopping at the grocery store for your weekly list if you're hungry. I mean, that's just like, if you're spending at the grocery store and it's because you're going before dinner, you might just want to say to yourself, okay, I'm hungry right now, and it's probably not a good time to be making some of those financial decisions. So, sleep, exercise, diet, all of those things are part of our whole energetic being. And so they're going to affect our ability to make sound financial decisions. And then the next is psychological. And there's starting to be some nods to this. The stories that we tell ourselves, the belief system that we're carrying from childhood into our adult lives, that's the conversations we need to start having. In fact, when I meet with my clients, I don't even look at spreadsheets or budgets or numbers until session 5. We are talking about your money history. We're talking about the relationship between you and your romantic partner or family of origin, if that's where the problem lies. We are looking at whether or not you're having the story that you find helpful, or if you want to try to change it. If you want to say to yourself, system, get into my process with money, and do I want to keep it there, or do I want to replace it with something that's a little healthier? So that psychological level is really important. And then below that is the neurological. So if we are having a nervous system response at any part of this, then we have to do training. We have to say, okay, the first thing we're going to start doing is a little bit maybe of exposure therapy. Let's just take the case of budgeting. Let's just say, boy, every time I think about sit down and tracking my income and expenses, I just really get activated. I get sweaty. I want to procrastinate it. I feel uneasy. Then we say, okay, well, the first thing we're going to start doing is just going to start doing some meditation and start envisioning the idea of sitting down. So not really sitting down to look at your numbers, but we're going to get to the point where we can hopefully bring calm into the space of just thinking about dealing with money, whatever that activating circumstance is.
Thank you so much for telling us this deeply and this detailedly. even though many of the people might hide their trade secrets, but you just reveal them so truly, so transparently. And I'm deeply impressed by that.
I just want everybody to recognize how, how important it is for you to, because one of the societal messages is that you are solely responsible for your financial problems. And what I want to help people understand is that just creates all kinds of shame, which then in turn leads to greater avoidance of dealing with the financial problem, which leads to more of that financial problem happening. So we're never going to get out of it. And I think it's redesigned. I mean, there are people who the system is set up for them to succeed and for others not to succeed. And we first have to get out of that shame. Like, wait a minute, there's a lot of things that are going into why I might not be able to succeed with money that are outside of my direct control. So it's not a secret. We want everybody to understand this, to go, okay, where is my hang up? Where's my problem? Which layer is it in? And then you can use the correct solution if you understand where the problem really lies. And if everybody just says, oh, I need to learn more and I need to have better self-discipline, if it's a different life, like if you're a person of color or an immigrant and you're living in the United States, there's a whole lot of societal factors that are affecting your ability to succeed with money. And you don't need to say, it's just like, right, I'm not, that's not my problem. Still love working because there are going to be obstacles for you. But that's not the problem by itself, is that you don't know how to work on.
That's so true. And it gives me a very nuanced way to look at it, not just blaming me or blaming myself. It's more about seeing through me and myself.
Mm-hmm. Right. Taking all of those layers and saying which ones are affecting me and how, and then we can attack it, attack the problem with the correct solution. Like, I don't want you to try to basically like open a ketchup bottle with a sledgehammer. That's the wrong tool for that problem. And it's going to create more problems in the end, because if you go around, well, let's say it's literacy, or you just think, okay, I need to start a new habit. I'm going to read a new habit. And when you start with that, well, then that increases your level of shame. It creates another belief system, maybe like, I can't learn how to be better with money, or I can't figure this out. I'm not smart enough to be good with money. Like, it might increase that kind of a belief system in you that then, again, makes it more difficult to succeed with money. And it's just probably not true.
But some people might argue that trauma-based financial therapy is making people overly introspective, because at some point of time you have to make action and not analyze your childhood. How would you answer them?
Yeah, that's a really good one. That's why I say it's at sessions that we do delve into the money, but it's after we've come to this recognition. So one of my favorite analogies that I like to use is the difference between fight or blame and responsibility. So the analogy is, let's say you're living in your home with your family. We'll just put you in that situation. And an arsonist comes and burns down your home. Okay? Whose fault is it that your family doesn't have a place to stay that night?
Profit.
It's the arsonist's fault that your family doesn't have a place to stay that night. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that your family has a place to stay that night?
Me?
It's yours. Arsonist doesn't feel any responsibility to that. If you need for them to feel responsible for making sure that you have a place to live, you're going to be out on the street for a long, long, long time. That's just not how the world works. It's your responsibility to do the things that are right, even though it's not your fault that you're in the place that you're in. So we get to that, we try to get to that place very quickly, like, okay, here's what happened when you were growing up. Here's the belief systems that comes into it, especially with couples, when we go, it's not that they're, selfish or lack of discipline. This money has a symbol in their world. It's tied to their identity in this way, which is coming up in this behavior. And then they can also have some understanding for the ways that each other are thinking about things. And when we bring to the forefront of our consciousness then we can start to turn on that frontal cortex, start making deliberate choices with instead of just subconsciously going through life and making these financial decisions. We can say, you never know, having really fancy stuff is my way of saying that I have value. Because when I was growing up, I always had secondhand things. We never had nice stuff. My friends all had nice things and I didn't. And so now that's like the symbol of my own value as a human being. And then when we examine it, we go, actually, your value as a human being has anything to do with that. And so you can conscientiously say to yourself, you know what? I have things that are more important to me when this is no longer tied to my self-image because I've exposed this belief. And our beliefs are not just what's going on in our mind doesn't make it fun. Doesn't make it choice. It's definitely the truth that we're living by. But if you can bring it to the forefront and say, okay, we want to live by a different truth now. The truth is, I have infinite worth, no matter what my clothes cost, no matter how fancy hotels I stay in when I go on vacation, no matter, if I'm using expensive products or, inexpensive products, we can start telling ourselves, and we can use different journaling processes. We have meditation we can start saying, hey, we are, your whole podcast about that spirituality part. My soul that's who I really am. It's not this thing that you see, and it's not the clothes that I wear or where I go or what I'm doing, that it's this eternal being, this higher self, this greater wisdom that really is the essence of who we are.
That's so powerful. And you really mentioned about the difference or the intersection between individual healing and systematic reform that we have to take. So, Jennifer, are there any ways our listeners can connect with you? Maybe your website, LinkedIn, or Instagram?
Yes, so I am on LinkedIn. If you go to Jennifer Edwards CFP, look that up, you'll see me on there. My business is breakthroughfinancialwellness.com. You can connect with me there. And we're working on some different offerings to help people go through. You can always meet with me one-on-one, but we're also trying to find some ways to serve a larger population. So please reach out if you're finding that any of this, and if I can just point you in the right direction of another resource that could just kind of get you on your way. I know some great books. There are, other programs. If you just need to start working on a trauma response system, understanding how the body works, that could be a really good place to start if you're finding that some of this stuff is really, it's doing that to you where you're going, oh yeah, I'm about to have a conversation with my partner about money and I just avoid it, and then I just give in and I really don't put myself out there. There's lots of ways that this shows up and makes it difficult to succeed with money.
Sure, our listeners would love to get connected with you, get on the call and share their problems with you. Jennifer,
I'd love to help. I would always love to help.
Yeah, obviously. Jennifer, before getting off the conversation, do you have any last remarks or final lessons that you want to leave our listeners with?
Yes, I want to help people understand that financial shame lives in isolation. And you need to know you are not alone in this. Whatever your financial hang-up is, there are people on the planet who share it. And we need to talk about it. We need to be able to say, I have some credit card debt. We made some mistakes with, my investments. I made some emotional decisions. I'm raising my hand with both of those things because I've done exactly it. My husband and I don't talk about money the way that we should. And financial professional, right? So, just letting everybody know that if you think you're the only one with that you're not. And let's find a group. That's why I'm starting some of the products that I want to have are some group sessions where we can all say, what, I'm not the only one. That shame lives in that isolation, and we need to talk about it more and realize that there are lots of factors outside of our own ineptitude. It's really has a lot more to do with other systems than just that.
For me, today's conversation reminded me that money isn't just about math, it's about memory. It carries the weight of our lineage, our fears, and our hopes, our freedoms, our aspirations. Jennifer, your work shows us that healing our relationship with money isn't about earning more, it's about feeling safe enough to receive. Thank you for joining on Cosmic Confluence, where we explore the spaces where science, soul, and story meet. Until next time, breathe, pause, and remember your worth was never meant to be measured in currency.